Hi, I'm Kamali, taking you through the stories people are talking about and sharing around the world on NewsFeed today. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela has been the top trending topic in South Africa for 2 weeks since her death. Her memorial will be held over the weekend. Today we look back at how social media has been remembering her. The law that could make it impossible for Syrian refugees to ever go home. Apple's new update is breaking some people's iPhone 8. We'll tell you why. And happy Friday, but not for this guy. Today's Animals Doing Stuff is this hangry crocodile in Australia. Well, at the top of today's news feed is Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. Her name and people's thoughts and feelings about her have dominated social media in South Africa in the weeks since she died. But her life was a controversial one, especially in its later years. So how should we remember the woman that so many South Africans call the mother of the nation? Now, one South African news channel was forced to pull an advert, this is it, that juxtaposed labels characterising Mandela as a hero, villain, icon and lawbreaker in the days after she died. The Canadian national broadcaster also caused uproar for calling her the mugger of the nation.
We were the cannon fodder, we were the foot soldiers, and we were exposed to the viciousness of apartheid.
And now a new documentary shown at Sundance and premiered in South Africa this week on that same news channel has brought to light new information about some of the gravest allegations made against Mandela while she was alive. But the biggest reaction on social media in South Africa has been about what she meant particularly to black South African women. This Instagram post says that Winnie didn't die, she multiplied. People have been paying tribute to her strength in keeping the Mandela name alive while her husband was in prison, despite the constant harassment by the apartheid police. And women have been paying homage to her, wearing dirks, raising their fists and declaring #I am Winnie Mandela. Well, Lindsay Chutel is in Johannesburg for us and joins us now live. So, Lindsay, as I said, these past 2 weeks have been a time of remembrance. Just give us a sense of what it's been like as people remember Winnie Mandela.
So, thanks, Paul. The #I am Winnie Mandela campaign was really quite interesting because it came from that initial international and local reaction to remembering Winnie Mandela. There was an immediate outcry after that particular advert that you mentioned, where South African women felt that Winnie Mandela was being vilified, in particular because she is a woman, because her legacy is controversial, and that they felt that she was perhaps being scapegoated for the flaws of the anti-apartheid movement. And so what essentially happened is that you see South African women last Friday, again this Friday, I've participated as well, covering their hair in solidarity with Winnie Mandela. And it takes on two meanings. One is that in South Africa, particularly in African cultures, when you're mourning, you cover your head. And then also just to emulate the style of Winnie Mandela in particular.
Absolutely, and the style is being emulated as we see in these images, and also by the piece you're wearing, Lindsay. Now, I've spoken a little bit about the controversy, that advert that was played. Just give us a sense, because for those who don't remember the time after Nelson Mandela came out of prison and him and Winnie split up, there was some controversy surrounding Winnie Mandela, wasn't there?
There was a lot of controversy surrounding, especially in the 1990s. I grew up in Soweto around that time, and Winnie Mandela was she was a fixture in the area. Everybody knew her, especially if you were around Baragwanath and the Orlando area where she once worked. But at the same time, there was a lot of what we're now beginning to understand is misinformation. So the particularly interesting thing is the murder of Stompie Sepai as a young boy who was 14 years old, and he was killed by the so-called Mandela Football Club. And that's raised a lot of controversy because the argument, the understanding up until fairly recently was that that murder took place on Winnie Mandela's orders. And, you know, there were even during that time in the late 80s and the early 90s, there was a lot of talk around the time about Winnie's controversy. Some people called her a heavy drinker. Some people lambasted her for having an affair while Mandela was in prison. But now, in hindsight and in reflection, that particular murder, for one, is being reassessed, that perhaps, and especially through that documentary you mentioned, that perhaps that there was a campaign of misinformation against her. The other thing is that the world has become a lot more forgiving of women who don't necessarily play the quiet first lady, and I think that's exactly what she was. And perhaps to her detriment, I think that maybe she was ahead of her time in the manner in which she behaved as an African woman.
It was. Okay, Lindsay, the memorial is this weekend. Thank you so much for being with us. All right, let's take a look at what else is trending this Friday on social media. Now, what you're looking at is a job ad that was posted by an Australian firm called Optus. And yes, you are reading that correctly. It said preferred candidates should be Anglo-Saxon. Well, after the obvious online backlash, the firm shamefully took the ad down and issued the obvious apology. Hashtag don't tell me how to dress is trending in Thailand ahead of this year's Songkrakan, that's Thai New Year. Women have been told to dress modestly during the three-day festival to avoid being harassed. And it's not out for another few days, but James Comey's book on the Trump presidency is already causing headlines. And yes, they aren't the kind of headlines that President Trump would want. In the excerpts that have been released so far, Comey compares Trump to a mafia boss type, where loyalty is all that's required and lying is legitimized. The book's already top of the bestseller. Now, in response, the Republicans have created a website called Lying Comey. The brutal attack on an 8-year-old girl in India is dominating discourse there online. Asifa Bano was a Muslim girl who was killed in the Indian part of Kashmir. 8 men have been arrested, and their arrests have angered Hindu nationalists and members of Narendra Modi's BJP. Incredibly, people have tried to stop charges even being filed, and rallies have been held in support of those accused. Nia Punya has been looking at the reaction to this on Indian social media.
To have Farhan Akhtar, he is a director in the Indian film fraternity. He said, imagine what goes through the mind of an 8-year-old as she's drugged, held captive, gang raped over days and then murdered. If you don't feel her terror, you are not human. If you don't demand Asifa get justice, you belong to nothing. You have also criticism because there were a few BJP leaders, part of the ruling government at the center, who defended the rapists in this case. They wanted justice for the accused and not for the young girl. They said that these men are being targeted because they belong to the Hindu community and the girl belonged to a Muslim community. There were many protests along communal lines, and there was criticism for the BJP government not speaking out. In light of that, you had BK Singh, a union minister, speaking out for the first time yesterday, and this is what he said. We have failed Asifa as humans, but she will not be denied justice. And you also have Omar Abdullah, another leader from the opposition, saying, Honorable Prime Minister, sir, there isn't a day when we don't hear from you speaking about things that are important to you, yet there are times when you are completely silent. Please don't let Asifa become one issue you choose to remain silent about. And that's the criticism, because Prime Minister Modi has not spoken on this issue yet, and that's why this headline has also gone viral. It says, here's what Prime Minister Narendra Modi had to say about the Kathua rape. That's where the crime took place. And this is what the story reads. The story will be updated once Prime Minister Modi actually speaks about this particular incident.
Now, last week, Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria introduced a new law which will potentially see property belonging to millions of displaced people being confiscated by the state. Apple have released an update for iOS that's had some of its customers fuming. Now, if you're anything like me, your screen gets smashed on the regular. So you pay for the repair and promise yourself you'll be more careful next time. Well, with this latest update, if you have an iPhone 8 and didn't have the screen repaired by Apple, then sorry, your screen now does not work. Now, this was reported by the website Motherboard earlier in the week. It's been talked about quite a lot online, and to date, that's the 13th of April, Apple have not yet released a fix. So what's going on? Well, Professor Andrew Quigley is the Chair of Human-Computer Interaction at the University of St Andrews in Scotland and joins us now. Professor Quigley, what's going on? Why haven't they released a fix?
You have three intersecting problems here. You have the question of standardization and what companies like Apple are expected to do to sell their products into particular markets around the world. You also have all the questions to do with security and privacy associated with these devices. And finally, you have the Apple business model. And any company like Apple has their business model, which when they're thinking about selling a product like a phone, they're not just thinking about the individual device you buy, they're thinking about the services, the repairs, the after-sales service and products and experience that they can actually offer to you. In this case, I would say I would encourage your viewers also just to think about the fact that these aren't just little phones like we had 10 or 15 years ago. These are biometric devices. These are devices that are being used for obtaining payments, for interacting with private information, for accessing your data. And the device itself is a data sensor, not just a little interaction platform. So Apple could justifiably say that to preserve your privacy and to preserve the integrity and the security of the system, that by actually keeping it in-house and keeping the repairs in-house, they will ensure your privacy and ensure the security and integrity of the sensor systems that are actually built into these devices. Absolutely. But at the same time, you have this question of, is it an economic reason that they've actually made this update? Because it will be factored in the after-sales service. But the last thing I would say to people is, people do need to think about, as we start having more and more of these devices, the lack of interoperability between the individual devices that you have, the fact that you buy from one manufacturer, you buy from a second, you buy from a third, you buy content from each one, you buy services from each one. Getting the information back and forth between these individual devices is torturous in many cases. So I think what we're going to have to start seeing is more research like we do here at the University of St Andrews with some of our colleagues to actually make this kind of interoperation between these devices more seamless. Like we do research to scale up to have hundreds of these devices working together, not just one phone, but having your phone plus your tablet plus your TV all interoperating together. So I think the onus is going to be on us as consumers to push our legislators to say, we demand legislation. Yes, you can sell to us, but actually we demand that these devices work in a bigger ecosystem of devices so that we can share content and we can go to third parties to get them repaired if and when that becomes something we want to do.
Something that I will have to do quite often. Professor Quigley, thank you very much for your time. All right, let me take you around the world for the other stories you need to know this Friday. Now, Vice News posted this video on their site from Russian state television under the headline, Russian state TV tells people to stockpile food in preparation for war. Yeah, he's standing in front of a mushroom cloud. Now, Vice says the presenter tells viewers that they should stockpile fewer sweets and more water. Now, I got my colleague here at TRT, who's Russian, to listen to the segment, and she says it's clearly satire, yet Vice don't seem to get the joke. Now, this came to me on my Twitter feed, retweeted by an academic who just brought into it. Goes to show, question everything, people. And the phrase, a face in the crowd, has lost its meaning in China, as the country's a leader in facial recognition technology. So much so that a man wanted by the police was identified in a crowd of 50,000 people at a pop concert. He's reported to have said that he felt safe going to the shows. He never thought the cops would have been able to ID him there. Oh, duh. And check out this punk. It's a Mary River turtle, and it, along with its remarkable hairdo, might now be in danger. His species is officially listed as one of the world's most endangered reptiles. These pics were taken by the photographer Chris Van Week. And because it's Friday, and because you should always leave them with a smile, have a look at this. Now, this crocodile at the Australian Reptile Park makes short work of this watermelon, as you can see, although why his keeper think he wants the melon is anyone's guess. It is pretty funny, and the kicker, his name is Elvis. Well, thank you very much. That's all from the NewsFeed team for this week. Do reach out to me with your questions, comments, complaints and suggestions. As always, it's at Kamali Melbourne. You'll find us 24/7 on Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. Follow, subscribe and add. See you again next week.